Coming up on this episode of Up for Debate, it's our first edition of our Up for Debate book club, and we read Ready Player One. Are you excited about the 80s and virtual reality and the collapse of society? Well, we've got the book for you. Stick around, we cover it fully right now. This is Up for Debate, episode number 88, recorded September 27th, 2017. We read Ready Player One. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Up for Debate, the podcast that I guess now reads books. Who knew? I'm Sean Jennings, joined as always by the man who has all of the keys, Mr. Matt Mariani.
Yes. Salutations, fellow book reader, Sean Jennings.
I am now. I am. I was telling Matt before the show, the last time I read a fiction book, it was probably because I was in high school and because I was forced to read it. Probably Catcher in the Rye was the last fiction book I read. I never read fiction, so this was a very nice change of pace.
Yeah, I look forward to doing this more in the future. I feel like I've always kind of wanted to be part of a book club, and now we've kind of made our own. And even though it's only two of us, that's not sad at all. You know, we can talk about books with each other, and that's fine. And our loyal fans who love this show can also talk about books with us. So I hope this thing kind of snowballs into a successful of us in reading many pages of literature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've talked about this. We want to have guests more on this. We tried to get a guest. We won't say who for this episode. They couldn't make it, so you're stuck with the two of us. But my goal is I'm going to try and steer Matt into, we'll always do books, I promise. But I also kind of want to do a movie club too, only because I don't read as much as I should. And I think maybe we'll try and split the difference, but we'll see. But I will say, Matt, I believe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, this is the first, we've done 88 of these. This is the first episode we've ever done that is on one single thing.
What? No, that can't be true.
Think about it. Give me an example. Everyone we've always done, it's always the Star Wars movies, the Marvel movies. Even last week was The Goonies and Airplane. We've never done an episode on one specific topic.
Well, I mean, we did a Saturday Night Live episode with all the episodes of Saturday Night Live.
But that was all about the different sketches. I'm just saying, taking a single piece of media. I guess the best, we did do an episode on Force Awakens, so that was probably the closest.
Yeah.
But even that was not quite as specific as this. So I'm excited. This is new territory for us.
Yeah. It's new uncharted territory, much like the uncharted territory that is explored in this book.
Absolutely. Now, I want to warn everybody, of course, this episode is rated S for spoilers. We will be obviously talking about the book if you haven't read it. We'll be talking cover to cover, so go read it, then come back and listen to this episode, and you'll enjoy it more. Matt, how do you want to? Do you want to start with your summary feelings on the book, and we'll go into the details? Do you want to start with the details and go into the end with the summary? How do you want to?
So, I've kind of compiled a set of notes, and I think maybe the best approach is to just kind of go, like, I was just kind of going to read the commentary, because I think we both, after talking with you, Sean, I think we both came to the same conclusion immediately after reading the last page of this book, which was, I don't think I've ever had more mixed feelings about
very true
about a work of literature or film or anything of that spirit in my life. I mean, this was a doozy, and I really have never had more conflicting opinions. That's the good way I would word it, because I think that this book is useful for exploring the passion that a writer might have for a specific topic. And even though, because the number one thing that comes to my mind when I think of if I were to summarize the entire book in one word, it would be, or rather in a statement, in one statement, I would say it would be fan servicey, focused, but totally a labor of love. So that is my
Your quick
that's just what
summary.
I took away from the book is that, well, what I mean by that is that the author, all right, Clive Davis, is that his name?
Ernest Cline.
That wasn't even close to what I just said.
No.
We can fix that in post, right?
Yes.
Like we always do.
Oh, hang on, Matt. Can you just stop talking for just a second? Your microphone's doing that thing again. But usually, if you back away a little bit and stop talking, sometimes it fixes itself. Yeah, put your hands up. You promised me you'd sit on your hands.
Backing away.
See there?
I did.
And it's fixed.
That's why they're up. Okay. I'm just gonna leave them right here.
Keep them up. Keep them up.
Keep them where you can see them. All right. So, Ernest Cline. Anyway, the author of this book, you can tell, has such an affinity, there's such an appreciation for 80s culture that, I mean, this whole book goes on and on with the references, the callbacks, the almost worship of everything 80s pop culture and specifically nerd culture. And you can really his appreciation is and his adoration for all these things really shines through, but it's very, very unfocused, and it's almost like reading the thoughts of someone with extreme ADHD.
Well,
but also with an extreme appreciation for 80s culture. Now, this was, I should preface, it was Cline's first book that he's ever published, as far as I know. And no matter what we say tonight about him or his book, I mean, the guy hit the mother load. He hit the jackpot here because his book is, a bestseller. Steven Spielberg is turning it into a movie. So this guy, obviously, we talk about getting all the keys. This guy, he's got them all in his pocket. So there's definitely a big, big treasure, a big Easter egg waiting for him at the end, for his troubles now.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to sum up my thoughts in this book in a sentence, it would probably be poorly written young adult fiction that I really enjoyed reading. Like, it's not a good book. I cannot stress how annoyed I was reading it at how poorly written and cheaply made this book was. To call this man a great author is not a great description. However, I enjoyed this book in the same way people enjoy 50 Shades of Grey or Twilight or The Hunger Games. It's not a good book, but it is an enjoyable read. And that is why I'm so conflicted about it, because it is absolutely that young adult fiction genre that nobody wants to admit it is, but it totally is, with everything from like the young hero who gets like buffed throughout the book for no reason and falls in love with the girl at the end and has to defeat the big government evil bad guys to win some sort of prize to pull himself out of poverty in this post-apocalyptic society. It's like he basically just rewrote Hunger Games, and the book was written in the first person, which for me is like the cheapest way to write a book, because it's so easy when a character can just tell you how they feel rather than you inferring it through good writing. And I don't mean to trash on Ernest Cline too much, because good for him. He's very successful and he's going to make a lot of money, and that's fantastic. But in terms of just being a book, it's not very good at all.
Oh,
that's really my feeling.
No, I 100% agree with you, Sean. I think that it really is not a good book at all.
And
it's an adventure. It's an adventure. It's a page turner. For some reason, I haven't really figured out why, but I got through this book relatively quickly, and I wanted to kind of see the adventure play out. It's one of the best examples I can think of like reading a movie.
Yeah.
The
movie's going to be way better than the book. And if the movie sucks, it's better than the book, because this is a movie. It really is. This is meant to be seen, not read.
Totally. And I thought that one of the biggest problems with the narrative that I found was the constant need to explain every single bit. I feel like if he had just gone in with the idea that the only people that are going to read this are with the same affinity for 80s nerd culture as me, get all my references and I won't have to explain any of them, I think the book would be like half the length, but twice as good. If he just kind of let it up to us to go look up the things he was talking about.
I think a very easy way to improve on this book, this book is 3 books. That's really the problem. It's 3 books, right? You've got a post-energy society collapse, which is interesting. You've got cool immersive virtual reality world, also interesting. And then you have just a book about the 80s, which is also interesting. But when you smash them together, I think it's like, it's mixing 3 things that just don't belong, and it kind of rejects itself. If this book had been, for example, just an example, if this book had been a Willy Wonka style adventure set in the 80s around a crazy video game developer who works for Atari or something and made this video game and left his fortune to these kids, I would have liked it much better. Because in the same way, if this was just society has collapsed and this young guy's got to figure out how to survive using technology in a world where technology doesn't work anymore, that's also more interesting than this book. But instead, it's like he had a bunch of half-baked ideas he kind of smashed together to make a book that kind of worked. And I thought that was a missed opportunity.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because as I was reading the book, I found myself thinking like, wow, I really hope that this post-energy collapse society thing, I really hope he kind of fleshes this idea out. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more of, what would happen to society if such a thing were to occur, or what his ideas of how a society like that would function and grow. But instead, I think what we got was little snippets. That was more or less just the bedrock upon which to kind of he builds his house. He builds his story out of, and it doesn't really get a whole lot of attention. And especially as we go, we see little glimpses here and there. There's some kind of spoilers. I should go say before we go.
They're
any
all
further.
spoilers. They're all spoilers.
Yes, but as you go, you learn that the corporation in the video game world, or the virtual world, the corporation from the virtual world is actually basically controlling the world's resources and the world's police. And not only are they an extremely powerful entity in the virtual world, but they've basically become in the real world.
The whole indentured servitude part of the book was fascinating to me. Oh my God, in the future, if you don't pay your debts, you become basically servants of these corporations. And then there's like 2 sentences in the book where it's like, wow, think of all the employees who work upstairs in these buildings. Do they even realize what's going on with the indentured servitudes below? I'm like, write a whole fucking book about that. That'd be great. I'd love to read that. That's so cool. But it's a throwaway sentence in a book where there's 1,000 of those, where you're like, the Ernest Cline for me is a good details guy. I think some of the details around how this VR world works and how, the little bits he gives us of like, how like a VR suit would work, or like a motion control suit would work, or like even the little bit where he was talking about when he gets the apartment, and he talks about the shower that sort of cleans him and the automatic door. Like some of that was kind of cool, actually. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But it's all throwaway to this like weird sort of story that goes on. I don't know. It wasn't a good mix for me between those elements. Like I wanted more of some and less of others.
I kind of didn't really understand why he needed to explain anything from the real world at all. Like, don't get me wrong. I found those pages extremely valuable in and of themselves. And like you said, I really would like to see a spin-off, almost like a spin-off book created just in that world, in this quote unquote real world that his character lives in. But I feel like he could have just had, it all set in this virtual world and not explained any of that at all.
Pick your battles. Pick your battles.
I think the reason he was kind of going for almost like a Willy Wonka thing, like, he's from
totally.
Kid is from a poor family, down on his luck, downtrodden, which also is like the perfect 80s plot anyway, right? When you watch all the 80s kind of what is it, like underdog hero stories all have that same
But we talked about the Goonies last week.
Right, exactly. So I can see where he's coming from, but I mean, he really kind of goes almost full like schizophrenic, where he is explaining this whole plot, or bipolar, like explaining this whole plot, fleshing it all out, and then just like shifts it to this other world that is also very interesting, but like you said, the two sides are very much at odds with each other.
Well, and he keeps doing this. He keeps doing this thing where he keeps interjecting. How do I want to put it? He keeps interjecting. He keeps interjecting these kind of complicated details later in the book, only when it services the plot too. Like the first third of the book was really boring. It really was, because it was all exposition, and I that really bugs me. I didn't care for that. There were little details there that were good. Overall, it was slow to get into. Once the sort of mystery puzzle solving element came in, I think it picked up a little bit. But like when you're
around when he finds the first key, I thought
totally. Then as soon as they blow up the trailer park, that's when the action gets going. That's when things start happening, right? And so you're introducing more characters. I think it's a little better at that point. Yeah. But it's like when you're 2/3 of the way almost to the end of the book, and they're like, oh, it turns out there's a thing in this world where you can have, where he gets his asteroid that he kind of lives on at the end of the book, and he's like, oh yeah, it turns out in this world, we didn't tell you this earlier, but you can have a private space, you can go and keep all your shit. And it's like, well, it's like, don't throw in details when it's convenient for the plot. It didn't feel super well thought out to me in that respect.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. It's like he kept digging a plot hole and then immediately filling it up.
Yes.
And he would create things, just because it's a virtual world and he can do that. And then, or either conversely, his dirt that he would use to fill up his plot holes would either be from this virtual world that he created, or from this post-apocalyptic world that he created. And he was kind of like towards the end, it kind of just felt like he was making things up as he was going along. Didn't really edit much of it out. It's just like, oh wait, so I need a useful device to explain why this is happening. All right. I thought the best example of that was when he's playing that arcade game, or he just magically stumbles upon that arcade game in the pizza shop.
Yes, that was annoying.
Stumbles on the pizza shop, and then that coin turns out to be like the crucial item, the crucial MacGuffin he needs at the end of the story.
Very cheap.
Like it looks like, it sounds like, to me, you can clearly tell, and I think this is a beautiful thing in a way, because it kind of shows his raw side as an artist first starting out, as an author like first starting out, that he wrote all the way till the end of the book, and then was like, oh crap, I need to insert some kind of MacGuffin. And then he went, I could almost see him like going back in his story and rewriting the part with the pizzeria and the arcade and the coin.
Well, one thing about Ernest Cline, and I don't know how much you've read about him, Ready Player One was his first book. Before that, he was best known for spoken word poetry. And this book reads to me as someone who does not know how to write long pieces of literature. Because again, I feel in small doses, in small parts of the book, there are a lot of really good small stories within it. As one complete work, I think it falls a tad bit short. Now, I do want to spend a minute. I want to really dive into the 1980s-ness of this book, which we haven't really touched on too much. First of all, I am more than willing to, willing suspension of disbelief. I'm willing to believe that this is a real world where there's no more energy and people live in VR all the time and the Oasis is real. Okay, I'm willing to buy into that. But this weird idea that this all-encompassing future VR world is like weirdly based on pop culture from the 80s really bothered me, and I don't know why. But like every time where they're like, and you reminded me, I gotta make another point about the main character later, but where it's like, oh yeah, the creator of the game knew every movie from the 80s and every video game from the 80s, and he loved the 80s, and then there's a big 80s revival, and everyone watches 80s TV shows now, and I'm like, but like, no, that's not a thing. Like, that's really bothersome. And what bothered me about Ernest Cline's writing, another problem I had, was I give him credit. He knew his 80s video games really well. I thought he did a good job with the games in the book, like Joust, where I think it was a good use of those throughout the games. I honestly wish he had just left it there. and not said all 80s culture, the characters are like, I listen to Duran Duran to get psyched up. And I'm like, we get it. It's the 80s. Stop. I wish he had really just focused on the video game piece because I thought that was well. The problem I had was all the other 80 references were super cheap. Most of them that I noticed were like, I went walking and I fell down, like in Back to the Future. And like that was the whole reference. And it's like, they're not very good. They're not very, like I had to solve a mystery, like Indiana Jones. And I'm like, we get it. You watch things in the 80s. Like it really didn't click well for me.
That part really, especially in the beginning, in that really long exposition, it really sounded like a very creepy religion that had developed. Like, and I didn't really quite understand why. It was almost like a cult of personality in a way. Like the guy, Anorak, the guy who creates the Oasis.
Yep.
He almost becomes a godlike figure in a way, or at least some kind of messianic figure. Because he created this big virtual world and he happened to really love the 80s. So then the rest of the world now watches 80s movies and memorizes them. And when he talked about the amount of time that his character spent, he was like, it was my 12th time watching
Pretty in Pink or whatever reference.
Yeah, Pretty in Pink. Yeah, or Family Ties. Like I've watched the entire series about 13 times. Like, it's like, and I felt kind of sad in a way because it's like, I think in a way maybe it speaks about society and binge watching and things like that. But at the same time, like, you wonder how society could have plummeted so far that that's all people do now. Well, is they go to work and they come home and they rewatch this movie that they've seen like 20,000 times.
Well, and that's what kind of bothered me, which was they pretty much made very little reference to the pop culture of the current day in the book. And I understand why. They really focused on the 80s things and life in the Oasis. But then they would sneak in weird references that I thought like either weren't well thought, but they make a reference about how their because now they're famous in the book, right? Because everyone knows who they are. They found these clues. Like they're in a sketch in SNL, which they reference in the book. And I'm like, is SNL still a thing in like 40 years in the future and people watch it? Like or they make a reference like, oh, people are putting stuff on YouTube. And I'm like, I thought you kind of made it clear that the Oasis was everything, but YouTube is still a thing. Like it was those kind of weird references where I'm like, I feel like it was just easier for the author to just say everything's 80s. It's pretty easy. Don't have to make up future pop culture because just everything's the 80s.
Well, see, I saw the SNL reference as just yet another reference to the 80s, even though SNL came out in the 70s.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's fair.
Kind of like peaked, or like not peaked, but it was very popular in the 80s. It's just another 80s thing, like late 70s, 80s. Saw it at least, but it was very very creepy that kind of devotion, and I felt it was just unnecessary. Like, okay, we get it.
Yeah,
like, you love the 80s.
And I would have really loved, and this happened right at the tip end of the book, and I would have loved a lot more of it. Really, an in-depth backstory on James Holloway, the creator of the Oasis. We learned very late in the book, and on the surface, his motivations and why he did what he did, why he locked himself away, why he created this contest, why he created the Oasis. We get like little sprinkles here and there, but they don't dive in. And I'm like, he's almost in some way the most interesting character in the book, and you don't touch on him at all. You spend a lot of time just talking about why trailers are stacked on top of each other in the future. Again, picking your battles, things that could have been picked up and done better. But you did remind me, there was one thing that really bothered me about this book. Again, very young adult fiction, where the main character knows everything and can solve every problem. And it really started to piss me off in the middle of the book, where he knew like no one fucking knows everything this guy knows and can get out of every jam.
Every single line to the movie War Games. I hated that part.
Like,
that
no. Like, oh no, I know everything about the history of this one guy. I have a Bible that's 5,000 pages long and I know every word in it. Like, no, you don't. Like weird, oh, I know these weird specific Japanese animes that ran for 8 episodes in 1987. And it's like, no, you're just a cheap character who can just solve any problem that's put in front of you. Your life is never in any real danger.
I really wish, speaking about having the manual that's also like a Bible for everything, and talking about the 80s culture as if it's its own like cult religion, I really wish he had almost like leaned into that more and just gone for it and been like, yes, this is a fully fledged religion in the new world, like post-apocalyptic, like everything really sucks now and we don't have a culture of our own.
Nostalgia is a religion.
We've kind of hijacked this culture, and maybe they could have had like a Reformation branch that like really appreciates 90s culture, and like they fight with each other. Like I feel like it would have spoken more about.
That's a great idea.
About the human psyche and the human dynamic that, like, whether it's religion or pop culture, whatever it is, like we're always going to fight about it. We're always going to find differences and embrace them. And like that would have been that's another book.
I love
this
that.
book is really like 5 or 6 books in one. That just would have been crazy. Like, just I wish he had leaned in one direction and just really gone for it instead of just these kind of like fanciful ideas that just he kind of makes like a pastiche of all of them.
Yep. I agree. But I do want to say though, I do think we've spent a lot of the time of this episode fairly criticizing the book. I would like to talk about things we liked about the book. And so people don't think we absolutely hated it. And I want to start off by saying,
before we do that,
yes.
Can I just jump in one more time?
Please do.
I just want to say I was waiting the whole book for just something unpredictable to happen and crazy. And I think the craziest thing we get is the gender of one of the characters doesn't turn out to be the one we expect.
Right.
Which is an interesting moment. I appreciated that moment. I think that it was refreshing in a way to kind of like blow away gender stereotypes and racial stereotypes. It was a pretty cool moment. But I was waiting for the character who's the best friend of not Parsifal, but the best friend of the guy who made the Oasis.
Oh, Og.
Og, yeah. I was waiting for his character to turn evil. I was waiting for him to turn out to be like the bad guy who's been like leading them astray, or conversely, like just using them. That's what I was really waiting for. Like he was using them to get the treasure. And like once he finds the Easter egg, he turns on him. And the final battle is with Og, not just the president of this corporation who have kind of been expecting it all along. I don't know. I thought that would have been a really cool twist in a way, like almost like a I don't know, like a
but wouldn't that
like
have been? But wouldn't that
twist.
have been almost as predictable? Like either he was going to be the bad guy or he was going to be the one who saves them at the end. You don't introduce his character and have him not do anything related to the plot. So you knew it was going one way or the other.
It was such a Deus Ex Machina though. It's like he gets his ass kicked and then the godlike character steps in and just basically makes him win. He doesn't even really win on his own merit. He just gets rescued.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I don't know. I thought it would have been really cool if he had turned out to be just like the jealous, evil guy the whole time.
I will say, though, I do want to circle back, though, to your comment, because actually I disagree with you a little bit. Finally, we're disagreeing. On the sort of the ending of the book and the sort of, not that I don't think this is the main thing you're supposed to take away, but the message in the book that, people who look different really aren't all that different. And, you shouldn't judge people based on how they look. Message at the end, I feel is radically unearned. And I feel like is so hollow at the end of this book. And it feels tacked on and it feels really cheap. And I was reading it and I felt gross. And I'm not going to lie. Because I really felt like this whole... You can't have a whole book, young adult fiction, and I'm going to keep calling it that because that's what it is. You can't have that whole book with the white male lead who gets everything he wants in the end being called a hero because he dates somebody with a birthmark on her face. That's kind of cheap, and it didn't feel right to me, and it kind of bugged me. And I get what they were going for, and I give them points for trying. They didn't stick the landing on it, and it just, I don't know. Didn't.
So which part did you not have a problem with? Him dating the girl, or H turning out to be a female?
Really, both of them.
Like the opposite of what we expect.
Really. Well, okay, first of all, that character was so mysterious the whole book. You knew something. They were going to reveal something. What it was. Because
that was what I was referencing. I was referencing
I know.
The character.
But, but I combined them.
I thought that was the like the message we needed. Like there didn't seem to be, like, he was hinting at a message this whole book, like some kind of like, this is what I'm trying to tell society, other than, oh my God, I really love the 80s. Like some kind of little like note or commentary. And then finally, when he says like, all right, here's this character that you guys all assumed was just a guy because he's nerdy, but he turns out to be like this big black chick. And it's like a total surprise to everybody.
I don't think it was a surprise at all. I wasn't going to call that specifically, but you knew something was up the whole book. That character is the only one you don't get any personal details on. So you know that there's going to be some sort of twist with that character. And it was tacked on at the end, and that message is nowhere throughout the book except at the end of the book, which I think is unfair.
I don't know. I thought that the Japanese brothers could have very easily have turned out to be like weeaboos, like Americans that like are just really obsessed with anime. So they made their avatars Japanese, of course.
But that's what I'm saying. If you had done that, I would have felt a little better about it. I have a problem because it's like, what, women in video games? You're crazy. You know, it's like don't. It's obvious for me, and it's like the love story. By the way, for me, also felt tacked on, and it was like I wasn't. Again, it's that young adult fiction where the two lead characters have to fall in love at the end, and it's like they never met in person. Besides the last few sentences in the book, this online romance was really based around a contest to win money, and I don't know. I got to the end and I'm like, that wasn't the ending I wanted. I did not want it to end in a love story. I wanted it to end with him getting rich. That's the ending. Don't tack on the love story.
I can tell you why he did that, Sean. I can tell you why
because he's a terrible writer with no original ideas.
I'm not sure if you've heard this before, but he loves the 80s. And in every 80s movie,
yep.
Okay, that's basically that's how it went. You know, every think of an 80s movie where the pathetic hero doesn't get the girl. There isn't one. That's how all of them go. So he almost modeled, I feel like he just modeled the book after all of these 80s movies that he referenced and borderline worship through this book. I don't think it was earned in any way. I think that relationship was totally unearned. I think that our sympathy for the relationship or like acceptance of it is totally unearned. And I think that the worst part of that whole thing for me is that she goes from not knowing him to being his rival, to hating him, to liking him, to hating him again, and then to loving him. And basically in no conceptual way that the actual human, that models actual human behavior. It just doesn't, it's just not how people really are. Mm-hmm. It's just not how like, it felt very artificial to me. I guess that's how I could describe most of the book and most of the interaction between the characters. It was just very, very artificial feeling.
But
there's this like nugget of love inside that you can really tell, you know, I could tell like as he was writing it, maybe he secretly thought it was going to be terrible, but that was going to be okay because he really, really loves the 80s and he just wanted to tell people about it.
If the message at the end had been friendship, I would have bought it. We're different people from different parts of the world with different experiences, but together we can come together and defeat evil. That's a good message. You've reinforced it throughout the whole book. You've shown that throughout the whole book. I get it. Don't end the book by saying, wow, what a nice guy because he's friends with a black woman. Like it's weird and I didn't like it. But I will say What I did find good, there is good in this book, and there were two things about this book I actually really liked, and I think that's why I stayed with it, and we'll talk about our final judgments at the end. But I really liked the contest, and I really liked the villain. I will start with the contest. I thought the contest was written in a way that was... of course he was going to win in the end. Everyone knew he was going to win in the end. Duh. It still felt suspenseful to me reading it. I maybe just because I don't know enough about 80s video games that like there was some mystery element to me as the reader where things were being solved. I thought he did a good job of our hero character was in the lead some of the time, but then he was behind, and then if he felt down and out, but then he came back. I felt that element was written well, and it really kept me engrossed and engaged throughout the book. If you had just removed that first third of the book where the contest wasn't really going on, I felt it would have been a better book because that's the part that really gets you going, and you don't want to put the book down because it's so engrossing.
Yeah. Speaking on the contest first, that part was really, I just really wanted to know more of the how than the what or the why.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to know how he was going to get to the next part, like what he was going to have to do in order to get the next key after that, and then the door, where the door was going to be. It was just interesting. I wanted to know. This book was very, very much the journey and not the destination.
Absolutely.
Because we all knew the destination. We knew he was going to get the girl. We knew he was going to defeat the villain. Knew he was going to find the treasure and win. There was no way it was going to end in any other way. But like it almost just, that's kind of kept me turning the pages, just wanting to see what was going to happen next.
And I think the events within the contest were actually kind of clever in some ways. Like the War Games thing, yes, he did solve it way too easily, but the idea of a contest where you have to recite every line from a movie perfectly while being the character in the movie, like to me that's a really cool idea. Like, could I do that? Like, how hard would that be to accomplish?
I think that would be borderline impossible for anybody that doesn't have like a graphic memory.
Well, I think if you had enough tries at it, I think
it would have to be a movie that you really loved.
But I liked the idea of that, and I liked the idea of some of the other again, I just like the back and forth between our heroes and our villains, where it's like, oh no, the villains figured this thing out before we did. Oh no, but now we've got a leg up on them, and oh, now we have to attack them and get this. Like that part was really sort of neat, and how the world kind of came against the villain in the end. I thought that was executed reasonably well.
Sean, I didn't hear any of that, what you just said.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
hear me?
Can you hear me, Matt?
I think your mic might be muted.
No, well, it's not muted on my end. Let me try something here. Sorry about that, folks. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello? Matt? Hello?
Can you
hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah,
I can hear you now.
For some reason, Hangouts muted me. That was weird.
That was really weird.
Yeah, everything on my computer screen flickered, and then weird stuff happened.
Whatever you said, though, you seemed very impassioned about it. You were like going on and on about it.
Well, I think Innovative Online Industries is listening, and they don't like this conversation.
Exactly what's happening.
And I do want to talk about them because I actually really enjoyed them as a villain. I thought they had some good shit going on. Like, again, in my mind, I'm always thinking, if this were real, what's the coolest part about it being real? And I'm like, if this were real, there would be an evil corporation trying to take control of it. They would try to cheat at the contest. How would they do that? They would hire a bunch of experts and a bunch of just guys in suits to go in, and a bunch of robots. Like, that stuff was really well thought out. And I'm like, oh, this is neat. And they would have I thought the leader character, Nolan, was kind of smart and kind of good. I would have liked to have seen more of him in the book. Again, the indentured servitude stuff I thought was really cool. I just thought they made a really good villain, even sort of at the end, the fight, not great, but decent. And frankly, if they did a spin-off book just talking about maybe like just some average Joe who gets sucked into the secret world of a business that can just kill people. Like that is really interesting. And again, another good nugget in a book full of nuggets.
Yeah, that part that part was another part I felt like should have been explored more. You know, this omniscient corporation that can control everything, and I really what I really liked, another thing that I really liked about the book was the part where he destroys it from the inside out. How he like basically basically like shuts them down
Yep.
from the from getting himself arrested and getting like, because we really get to see in a way the like the true oppression. Like we know that they're bad because they blow up the trailer park. It's like the Alderaan moment of the book. Um, but we don't really see the like what they do to people on a daily basis. They truly enslave them until Wade gets himself captured. Um, and I thought that part of the book was pretty smart because I didn't see that coming.
Well, and I really enjoyed the one scene we had of interaction between our villain and hero characters. Right after the first key was found, right, and they offer him the money and they say, "Come work for us, be on our side, tell us how you got the key and help us find the clue." And of course, our hero says, "No, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that." I thought that was a good interaction. I would have loved to see throughout the book more interaction with these characters and their sort of back and forth relationship between the two of them. I felt that would have been more interesting than our hero Wade doing it on his own. He kind of did it on his own most of the book. And I felt he could have used a little more interaction. There was too much of, again, that first-person writing style rarely in my mind works. There are very few books written that way that I like because I think it's cheap. I think it's easy. I think it's easy when a character can just tell you all the answers and what they're feeling. And this book fell into this trap where we spend way too much time in one person's head and not enough time exploring relationships.
Agreed. I think that's well said. I think Wade himself kind of monopolizes a lot of the story, and that in the first person speech definitely exacerbates that. Like we know next to nothing about any other character other than how they interact with Wade.
Yep.
And what Wade thinks of them, and what Wade thinks they're thinking, and or like how they're acting in relation to what Wade is doing and perceiving. I didn't like that part. Because these characters could have been really interesting if we had just gotten a little bit more of their own thoughts. We had just gotten inside their heads a little bit more.
Well, and this is why I'm optimistic about the movie, which to be fair, I really shouldn't be, because when you take a mediocre book and make a big budget movie out of it, that almost never works. It works sometimes, but rarely. I'm optimistic because now we're going to get to see the world outside of his head. We're going to get to see the characters interacting more. And because it's a movie with expensive actors in it, you're going to see them doing more than just being alone in virtual reality. So I'm going to be optimistic that I rewatched the trailer now after reading the book before we started doing this. And I actually got a little excited because I said, while I'm gonna a high level of concern, I don't know. There could be something really interesting there when that movie comes out in March.
Yeah. Now, when we compare it to the movie specifically, I think two movies which are really kind of like the light side and the dark side of when you take this kind of medium, this kind of like pop culture worship in the same regard. And the first two movies I think of, the light side, you have Wreck-It Ralph.
Sure.
You have that movie Pixels.
Yeah.
Starring Adam Sandler and all of Adam Sandler's friends. All right. So this movie could, in my mind, it could go one of two ways. All right. You could either take the Wreck-It Ralph approach, the light side, where you just make casual references and kind of stick things in. Oh, remember this? Remember, and then it's like a one note thing, like, oh, there's Qbert. You remember Qbert? There's a character from Final Fantasy. Ha ha ha. Like, that's cool. Or you can go the dark side, which is Pixels, where every reference is essential to the plot. And every reference, that every kind of pop culture or video game reference drives the plot and is necessary. And you change the very nature of what those things are because you're manipulating it to form your own story. I hope they go the first route. And I think that they will, because Spielberg's a smart guy and because the book was kind of written that way. But again, you kind of have another element in there from the dark side where, you know, everything Wade visited in the book was essential for driving the plot. Only a couple of things got casually thrown in there, but, you know, like, for instance, quoting the movie War Games verbatim, you know, that's not going to make for a very exciting scene, I think, in the movie, unless it's done right, unless it's done properly. So this is going to be quite a tightrope for Mr. Spielberg to walk on.
Well, and what's interesting for me, because, by the way, both great examples, I think, of similar genre films. Those are both comedies. You know, we're talking about, it's a drama film. I mean, this is really, it's an action film. It's a film that's got to have a lot for a lot of people, and I agree, having Spielberg involved is a positive. But he also doesn't have a spotless film record, and I will warn you that this film was written by two people. One is Zach Penn, who you may not have heard of, but he wrote such great films as Elektra, X-Men: The Last Stand, the Inspector Gadget film starring Matthew Broderick, and the first Hulk movie that with Eric Bana. He co-wrote it with Ernest Cline. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see exactly how that movie does. And Matt, the good news is highly likely you'll be able to buy it in our Winter Movie League.
Yeah, I think I should get like some kind of like first dibs on it, since we had this show and talked about it, and a certain other person who was also in our movie league didn't show up tonight. So I think I should, like, if there's ever a bidding war between me and the other person, I think I should get like a little extra boost there.
I would not get your hopes up. We have a Facebook comment. We're live on Facebook right now, facebook.com/UpForDebateTV. We got a Facebook comment. Nicole Trayford writes, she says, that is exactly how I felt about 50 Shades of Grey. And I think, and I'm assuming she's referencing, just because of the timing of the comment, turning the book into the movie, specifically with 50 Shades of Grey, which a lot of people said didn't quite capture the spirit of the book.
It's a hard thing to do. We don't really, I think, appreciate how difficult it is to capture the spirit of a book in a movie, because especially if it's two different authors, two different, like, author and creator combination, can be really hard to do. I think if you ever read the Lord of the Rings books and seen the movies, I think there's a great example there, because while they were both really, really good on their own, they're both totally different, just thanks to the medium and the spirit of each one of them. That being said, I've never read 50 Shades of Grey. But
that should be our next book in the book club.
Hey, you know what?
Actually, that might be really funny.
All right.
That might be one. We don't have to do next time, but we have to do like a 50 Shades of Grey Twilight type book.
I've heard good things. So,
Matt, we've got to. We're running out of time here, so we got to move on to final judgments. Unless you have any other points, I want to make sure we get through all the points on the book.
Oh, I think we could easily do another episode on all the points, but I think we can just we can close it out here.
The only other thing I was going to add is that this book has the worst opening of a book I think I've ever read. I almost put it down. I almost stopped reading it after the first few paragraphs, because it's it's
very exposition heavy.
It has to be the most do you mind if I read a little excerpt, because it's so exposition heavy? But let's see if you do this. It says James Holliday had died during the night. I'd heard of Holiday, of course, everyone had. He was the video game designer responsible for creating the Oasis, a massively multiplayer online game that had gradually evolved into the globally networked virtual reality most of humanity now used on a daily basis. The unprecedented success of the Oasis had made Holiday one of the wealthiest people in the world. At first, I couldn't understand why the media was making such a big deal. After all, the people of Earth had other concerns: the ongoing energy crisis, catastrophic climate change, widespread famine, poverty and disease, half a dozen wars, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It's terrible. People who haven't read this book need to know, hang in there, it gets better, but oh my God, that may be one of the worst openings of a book I've ever read.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
No.
Definitely wasn't great.
So let's talk about our final judgments here. And I think we have to do, we've never done this before for a book, so we have to figure out how we want to do it. I think first off, in honor of our true Goldilocks zone roots, I have to ask you, Matt, was this overrated, underrated, or appropriately rated?
Put me on the spot here.
I'll go first if you want time.
No. My first gut is definitely to say overrated. Like definitely 100%, just because it is written very, very not great. But at the same time, like the appreciation and it's kind of like an A for effort is what I want to give it, because while the writing really, really stinks, keeping in mind that this is the first book that this author has published, it's his first attempt at a narrative like this. He's never done anything like it before. And he really, really struck gold in terms of its popularity and success. Like, I mean, in my wildest dreams, could I ever even hope to come close to what he's achieved? But in a way, I also feel like it's just like how I felt when Parsifal gets the Easter egg at the end of the book. It just feels totally unearned. Like a good attempt, like better luck next time, not a, oh man, you hit it out of the park. This is like a bestseller gold, like, you know what I mean? Like a platinum album on the first single. No. So I'm gonna stick to my guns and say overrated.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to agree with you. I think I think this book really hit at a time of peak nostalgia, peak geek culture, the right book for the right time. I feel 50 Shades did a good job of this too, where if this book had been released 5 years ago, 10 years ago, actually it was released 5 years ago. That's the wrong way to phrase it. If it had been released pre-2000, it wouldn't have done as well. Because I just think that we're at a point where people eat up this type of content. So good for him. I'm genuinely happy for his success. But this is unequivocally a mess of a book. It really is. However, I enjoyed it.
Yes.
So it is overrated because it has set such a high bar of everyone telling me how amazing this book is. If they had come to me and just said, Sean, it's another one of those young adult novels that's really popular right now, except this one's more written for dudes and about the 80s, I would have been like, all right, I'll read that. But they didn't. They're like, oh my God, this is science fiction genius, and this guy's the next big hot thing in literature. It's like, cool your jets.
No.
Don't get your hopes up.
He's not Hemingway.
No, God, no.
Now, to kind of close out, I have a fun fact that I really appreciated about this book. So they reference somewhere in the book that the current president and the current administration of the Oasis is none other than Will Wheaton of Star Trek: The Next Generation fame, among other things. The audiobook is narrated by none other than Will Wheaton. It's a little fun tidbit there. He narrates the book, and there's a part where he gets a little nod as being the president of the Oasis, which is pretty cool. So
there you have it. Our first book in the book club has been completed.
Hey, we put it in the books.
We put it. It says sign it. It's being raise it to the rafters. It gets its bust in the Hall of Fame. Give it its green jacket. We've
put it in the books.
We've done it. Give it its
Our
medal.
first book. Next up, 50 Shades of Grey.
I will not promise we will do that. No, I think we do have a lot of great options, and I'll tell folks out there who are listening, if you have a recommendation for a book you'd like us to read on the show, please let us know, because we can only read so many books. You guys have read more than we have. So let us know. upfordebatetv@gmail.com is our email, or you can tweet it at us at upfordebatetv, and we'll keep an eye out for that. We may read your book. And if we do, how about this? If we pick your book on the air, we'll send you an Up for Debate tote bag, and Matt and I will sign a copy of the book you picked, and we'll send it to you with the tote bag.
You get a nice tote bag to put all your books in.
It's a book bag of sorts. Yes, exactly. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So you can enjoy that.
Sure.
Matt, anything else you'd like to say to the world before we conclude?
I'm looking forward to Ready Player 2, because that's what the sequel is going to be called.
It is,
right?
and he's writing it.
Yes, and like
it's going to
suck. It has
suck.
to be.
It's
right.
Good.
It has to be.
Well, did you see the reviews for his follow-up book Armada?
No, but I read the snippet in the back of the book.
Yeah,
it was very similar to Ready Player 1.
People did not enjoy it as much.
It was very much like a stream of consciousness, kind of like, here's all my thoughts, boom. I wonder if he just doesn't edit. Do you think he just doesn't really edit? Does he just go for it?
Again, I'm sure in poetry it works well. In a novel, not so much.
When you said that he was a poet, a beat poet or whatever you called him, it made a lot of sense, because he's very good at that stream of consciousness. Like, it's in my brain and it's out my mouth.
Yep.
But I think he's got to just kind of work on his editing a little bit.
We'll let him
fix
know.
all those plot, and not like right away, because that's what he did in this book. But if you're ready, Player One, to watch this in theaters, it's coming out when?
March 2018.
March. Okay.
So starring I don't think it's really starring anyone particularly famous.
As long as it's not Adam Sandler, I'm happy.
Yeah, Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cook. I don't know who those people are. Olivia Cook was in Bates Motel, the Ouija movie. And Ty Sheridan was... Oh, he was Cyclops in X-Men Apocalypse. Huh, okay. Anyway, there you go. We've got to wrap up here, but thanks everybody for joining us. I thought this was a super fun episode. Go to our website, upfordebate.tv, get all our past episodes. You can check them out there, as well as there's the subscribe button up in the corner. If you click that, it gives you links to everywhere you can get the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, we're everywhere. Video version on YouTube, and also where you can follow us. I mentioned the email and the Twitter account, also facebook.com/upfordebatetv. We're live Wednesday nights, I'm going to say roughly 8 p.m., but if you like the Facebook page, you'll see when we go live. We also tweet when we're live, so follow us there. We will be back next week with more great content here on Up for Debate. On behalf of Matt, thanks everybody so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.